going through a pretty serious drug addiction at the time. You know, my best friend passed away. Like, there was a lot of things that were going on, and I think at that time my world was kind of just like spiraling.
He rose from Detroit's shadows to become a lyrical god, a man who weaponized pain into poetry. But behind the fame was a storm no one saw coming. Addiction, loss, and near death would tear his world apart. This is Eminem's untold tragedy. The rise and the fall, Eminem's descent into addiction. When the Eminem Show dropped in 2002, Marshall had everything he'd ever dreamed of: fame, money, family, and the respect of hip-hop's elite. He was at the top of the world, but inside, something fragile was beginning to crack. He was exhausted. Fame had cornered him, and what started as a few sleepless nights would turn into a war for survival. Eminem would later reveal that his addiction began innocently enough: a couple of pills to help him sleep, a few more to take the edge off. Soon it became Ambien, Valium, Vicodin, and anything else that promised rest or escape. What started as an easy fix to insomnia quickly became a full-blown dependency. According to Rolling Stone, Eminem admitted that he would take up to 80 Valium pills a day, and when he ran out, he'd scavenge for methadone, a substitution drug used to treat heroin addicts, until he nearly overdosed in 2007, just hours from death, according to Rolling Stone, 2010. His spiral began earlier than most realized. By 2005, while on his Anger Management 3 tour with 50 Cent, Eminem's health was deteriorating rapidly. That August, he canceled all 10 European tour dates, citing exhaustion and other medical issues. Only later did the truth emerge. He had entered rehab for a sleeping pill addiction, according to Billboard 2005. At the time, fans and journalists speculated endlessly. Was Eminem burned out? Was he done with music? The truth was simpler and darker. He was dying.
It was sleeping pills, right?
Yeah. Well, sleeping pills like Valium, Ambien,
Okay.
Stuff like that, but also, I mean, Vicodin.
Eminem's confessions in later interviews laid bare the frightening logic of addiction. At first, it started out kind of reaching for the NyQuil, he recalled. Then the NyQuil didn't work, and now I need something stronger. The progression was textbook, but the scale, catastrophic. As he admitted, addiction runs in my family a little bit too. His uncle Ronnie, who had introduced him to rap, had taken his own life years before, and the emotional scars of that loss had never fully healed. By the time Eminem checked into rehab in 2005, he was already a shell of himself, detached, depressed, and in denial. He told interviewers later that he only stayed 2 weeks before checking himself out. He didn't think. He was an addict. He thought he just had a sleep problem.
So I think I stayed in rehab for maybe a total of 2 weeks, you know, and checked myself out. And I think I was convinced at that time, like, I'm not an addict.
What followed was predictable, yet devastating. Eminem relapsed almost immediately. He told himself he was fine, that he could control it, but addiction doesn't negotiate. Soon, he was taking methadone, a dangerous synthetic opioid, and by late 2007, his body finally gave out. He collapsed on his bathroom floor, nearly dead from an overdose. Doctors would later tell him he was only hours away from not waking up. This period between 2005 and 2009 was a black hole in his career. No tours, no albums, no interviews. Fans waited, speculating, unaware that their idol was waging war with his own reflection. Eminem would later describe those years as a blur of pills and paranoia, his days blending together in a haze of self-loathing and withdrawal. I wasn't fun, he once said. Maybe to some people I was, but mostly I was just moody, self-loathing, you know? Everything was woe is me.
What were you like to be around when all this was happening?
I wasn't fun. I was real moody, real kind of self-loathing.
And then, in 2006, tragedy struck again. Proof, Eminem's best friend and D12 bandmate, the man who had stood by him from Detroit's underground battles to the height of fame, was shot and killed outside a Detroit nightclub. For Eminem, that was the final collapse. Proof wasn't just his hype man or musical partner, he was family. The two had shared every high and low since the early 1990s. Losing him meant losing the last anchor to reality.
At that moment, it just seemed like my world was ending.
Right.
You know, that whole time period was the darkest place that I ever went into in my life.
The death of Proof sent Eminem deeper into addiction. He began using even more heavily, trying to numb the guilt and grief. In later interviews, he admitted blaming himself. What if I had talked to him that night? What if I'd been with him? Those questions haunted him, and as he confessed, I had to just learn to let that go. Nothing I say is going to bring him back. From that point forward, his world narrowed into silence. He stopped appearing in public. Tabloids speculated endlessly. Some fans thought he'd retired. Others whispered that he was in rehab again. The truth was far more fragile. Eminem was battling to stay alive. Meanwhile, lawsuits began piling up. The promoters of his canceled European tour sued for millions in lost ticket revenue, forcing him to testify in 2007, according to MTV News, 2007. His finances, though still strong, were under strain, not because he was broke, but because he was broken. And every day, Detroit, his hometown and the stage that birthed him, felt further away. When he did finally reappear, his face was noticeably different. He had lost weight, his energy had changed, and for the first time, people saw not Slim Shady, not the unflinching performer, but Marshall Mathers, the man beneath the mask. He admitted that during those years, he had started producing music for other artists instead of creating his own. "I knew I wanted to take a break," he said. "I wanted to work on artists from my label and just chill out for a minute." But that break turned into exile. The battle within, rehab, relapse, and loss. When the spotlight fades and the cheering stops, even legends have to face the silence. For Marshall Mathers, that silence was deafening and deadly. The man who once commanded stadiums with blistering rhymes was now fighting for his life in quiet rooms, surrounded not by fans, but by pill bottles. In 2005, at the height of his fame, Eminem's world came undone. He was living proof that fame could illuminate a man and burn him alive at the same time.
I knew that I needed to take a break. I knew I wanted to take a break, and I knew I needed to take a break from basically from the spotlight. I mean, I was going through a pretty serious drug addiction at the time.
By that year, he had released 4 consecutive platinum albums: the Slim Shady LP, the Marshall Mathers LP, the Eminem Show, and Encore. His alter ego had turned him into both a cultural lightning rod and a global superstar. But the higher he climbed, the more the pressure suffocated him. Fame had made Marshall Mathers a millionaire, but it also made him a prisoner of himself. He began self-medicating, first to sleep, then to function, and finally to survive. According to Rolling Stone, Eminem admitted that he was consuming up to 60-80 pills a day: Valium, Ambien, Vicodin, a cocktail lethal enough to kill most people. His insomnia had mutated into something far darker: dependency wrapped in denial.
And at first it started out kind of reaching for the NyQuil, and then the NyQuil didn't work, and now I need something stronger.
In August 2005, during his Anger Management 3 tour, the cracks finally widened into collapse. Eminem canceled all 10 European tour dates, citing exhaustion and other medical issues. At the time, his team released polite statements: nothing too revealing, nothing too alarming. But behind those words was a desperate truth. He had entered rehab for sleeping pill addiction. Billboard confirmed that the cancellation was not merely exhaustion, it was a cry for help. Yet, even in rehab, he struggled to face what he had become. He stayed barely 2 weeks, convincing himself he wasn't really an addict. He didn't believe he needed saving. He told himself he could control it, that he'd just go to a sleep clinic, fix his insomnia, and get back to work. But addiction doesn't bargain, it only takes. And the moment he left that clinic, he started using again. Vicodin, Ambien, Methadone, the pills that had numbed his pain now dictated his life. By 2006, tragedy would strike again. The death of his best friend and D12 bandmate, Proof. The two were inseparable, more like brothers than collaborators. Proof had been with him since the basement battle days in Detroit, pushing him to keep rapping when no one else believed in him. When Proof was shot and killed outside a Detroit club, something inside Eminem shattered irreversibly. He spiraled further into addiction. Pills became his only comfort, his only escape. He blamed himself for Proof's death, thinking that if he'd been with him that night, things might have turned out differently. "If I would have talked to him that day, maybe he wouldn't have gone to that club," Eminem confessed later. But nothing I say is going to bring him back. That guilt consumed him. As his inner circle worried, Eminem withdrew. He wasn't performing, he wasn't writing, he wasn't even showing up to the studio. His world had reduced to the confines of his Detroit mansion, a man surrounded by luxury, but suffocating in loneliness. Even his daughters barely recognized the person he'd become. His label executives and friends tried interventions, but Marshall was stubborn. The same tenacity that made him a lyrical powerhouse now fueled his self-destruction. He isolated himself completely, sinking deeper into depression and dependence. And then came 2007, the year of the near-death overdose. According to The Guardian, Eminem collapsed in his home after consuming methadone, a drug so powerful that just a few milligrams can be fatal. He was rushed to the hospital, unconscious, and doctors told him he was just hours from death. He survived, barely, but the message was clear. If he continued this path, the next overdose would be his last. He later recalled waking up in the hospital, confused, trembling, and ashamed. That moment, staring at the white ceiling, hooked up to tubes, was his reckoning. It wasn't just about losing his career anymore. It was about losing his life. In a later reflection, Eminem said that what scared him most wasn't dying. It was that he didn't care if he did. The pills had numbed him to such a point that existence itself had lost meaning. After the overdose, his family and team intervened again. But this time, he listened. He checked back into rehab, this time for real. And helping him through it was an unlikely ally, Elton John. Yes, the legendary British musician, himself a recovering addict, became Eminem's mentor and sobriety sponsor. In an interview years later, Elton revealed how the two would call each other every week for accountability. "I love him," Elton said. "He's one of the most brilliant lyricists of our time, and I'm so proud of how far he's come." Through Elton's guidance and a renewed sense of fatherhood, Eminem began rebuilding his life. But the process wasn't glamorous. Sobriety stripped him raw. The anxiety, the insomnia, the emotional vulnerability all came flooding back. He admitted that performing sober felt terrifying. That defiance, the same stubbornness that nearly killed him, now became his survival mechanism. By 2008, Marshall Mathers was sober, but he wasn't the same man. He was quieter, slower to smile, almost reflective, like someone who'd seen too much darkness to pretend otherwise. His rehab experience had broken his ego, but rebuilt his humanity. He started writing again, not as Slim Shady, not as the shock rapper the world knew, but as a man reckoning with himself. Those writing sessions would become the foundation of Relapse, 2009, and Recovery, 2010, albums that chronicled his fall and redemption. The line wasn't bravado, it was a promise, both to his audience and to himself. His comeback was slow but deliberate. He performed sober for the first time in years, rediscovering what it meant to feel the adrenaline without chemical aid. But the anxiety didn't disappear overnight. He revealed in interviews that being on stage without substances was like being exposed, raw and vulnerable. BBC Radio 1, 2013, quoted him saying, "I used alcohol to deal with stage anxiety. When I got sober, I had to relearn how to perform." The irony wasn't lost on him. The world had celebrated his pain for so long that even happiness felt off-brand. But that was the tragedy of Eminem, a man whose genius was born of trauma and whose healing threatened the very chaos that fueled his art. Still, sobriety offered him something fame never did: peace. He began spending more time with his daughters, Haley, Elena, and Whitney, focusing on family instead of fame. Those who knew him best said he was calmer, more introspective, even funny. The anger that had once driven Slim Shady had softened into gratitude. By 2010, Recovery became one of the year's biggest albums, selling over 5 million copies and earning a Grammy for Best Rap Album, according to Billboard, 2010. But the real victory wasn't the trophies, it was survival. Eminem had outlived his demons. In interviews that followed, he admitted that staying sober wasn't a one-time event. It was an ongoing battle. It's not like, okay, you did rehab and now you're good. It's something you fight every single day. His candor inspired millions, especially those fighting their own addictions. Forums on Reddit and fan communities were filled with recovering addicts saying that his story, his honesty, gave them strength to keep going, according to Reddit, 2010 present. And yet, recovery didn't mean reinvention without scars. The ghost remained. Proof's death still haunted him. Fame still felt suffocating. And though he re-emerged stronger, there was a melancholy undercurrent in every interview, as if he was always aware of how close he'd come to vanishing. Even years later, he would talk about that 2007 overdose with an almost clinical detachment, not as a victim, but as a survivor, dissecting his own autopsy. It's part of why Relapse and Recovery resonated so deeply. They weren't just albums, they were confessions set to rhythm, a blueprint for how to crawl out of your own grave. In many ways, Elton John wasn't wrong. Eminem's resilience wasn't just rare, it was miraculous. To overdose, relapse, lose your best friend, and still claw your way back to creative excellence takes more than talent. It takes an unyielding will to live when every part of you has already given up. When the Marshall Mathers LP2 arrived in 2013, critics noted a newfound maturity. He still had venom in his verses, but there was a clarity, a sober lucidity that hadn't been there before. Eminem wasn't just rapping anymore, he was testifying. He spoke openly about addiction's cyclical nature, warning others not to underestimate it. "If you really want to get sober," he said, "you can't touch anything. No liquor, no nothing." By 2025, he's been sober for 17 years, a lifetime in recovery terms. That number alone, for a man who once consumed 80 pills a day, is nothing short of astonishing, according to Eminem's ex-post. Ghosts 2023. But what's perhaps most poignant is how his tragedy became his testimony. Every lyric since his recovery bears traces of humility, the understanding that survival doesn't erase pain, it reframes it. In a world where so many artists have succumbed to addiction, from Kurt Cobain to Mac Miller, Eminem stands as a haunting reminder of what could have been lost. His story isn't just a cautionary tale, it's proof that even at the brink of destruction, there can still be redemption. Today, he lives quietly in Detroit, focusing on his label, Shady Records, and his family. He rarely gives interviews, and when he does, he speaks not with the brashness of Slim Shady, but with the wisdom of a man who's seen both sides of fame, heaven and hell. What makes his story tragic isn't the fame or the downfall, it's that it had to get that dark for him to see the light. And yet, from that darkness came rebirth. The pills are gone, the chaos has faded, and what remains is a man who refuses to be defined by his demons. As he once said, standing on a stage in Detroit, addressing the crowd with a quiet smile, the resurrection, sobriety, recovery, and redemption. For years, Marshall Mathers had been trapped in a cycle of chaos. The pills, the sleepless nights, the guilt. They had nearly taken everything from him. But from the depths of that despair came something no one, not even he, had expected: resurrection. When he walked out of rehab for the last time in 2008, Eminem was not the same man who had entered it. His swagger was gone, his voice quieter, and his focus sharper. There was humility now, the kind that comes only from staring death in the face and surviving. He didn't want to be Eminem the celebrity anymore. He wanted to be Marshall Mathers, the man. After his overdose, Eminem spent months in detox and therapy, enduring the physical agony of withdrawal and the emotional collapse that followed. He described it later as feeling like he was being reborn without instruction. Every part of his life had to be rebuilt from scratch, from his relationships to his career. Even his ability to rap, his greatest gift, felt rusty. He started small: daily runs, journaling, quiet mornings with his daughters. He replaced pills with structure, chaos with consistency, and when he was ready to step back into music, he did so cautiously, unsure if the world even wanted him back. It was during these fragile months that relapse began to take shape. The 2009 album wasn't meant to be a blockbuster. It was therapy. Every beat was a confession, every verse an exorcism. Yet relapse was dark, unsettling, and brutally honest, filled with twisted narratives and self-referential horror that mirrored his mental state. Critics were divided, but to those who understood addiction, it was a masterpiece of catharsis. Eminem himself later admitted it was an album he needed to make to purge the poison from his system. Rolling Stone 2010. The following year, Recovery would complete the transformation. Gone were the serial killer personas and shock value lyrics. In their place stood an artist confronting reality with open eyes. Recovery wasn't just a comeback, it was a reclamation. The album sold over 5.7 million copies worldwide and won the Grammy for Best Rap Album in 2011, according to Billboard 2011. But beyond the awards, it was the honesty that resonated. Listeners could feel the difference. The rage had given way to reflection, the chaos to clarity. Still, even in his new life, Eminem struggled with the ghost of his past self. He would later tell Complex that sobriety was lonely at times because he no longer recognized many of the people around him. Some people weren't there for the right reasons, he said. And when you get sober, you start to see that. That awareness changed everything, including his art. His lyrics became sharper, more technical, but also more introspective. He rapped less about killing pop stars and more about killing his own insecurities. When the Marshall Mathers LP2 dropped in 2013, it was both a sequel and a reckoning. It revisited his past while reinterpreting it through the lens of a sober mind. Songs like Bad Guy flipped the perspective of his earlier work, as if he were holding a mirror to his younger self. In Headlights, he even apologized to his mother, Debbie Mathers, ending decades of public feuding. Critics hailed the Marshall Mathers LP2 as a technical masterpiece. His rhyme schemes were sharper, his delivery controlled, his wordplay more intricate than ever. Even the New York Times noted that sobriety had made him more focused, comparing his flow to a surgeon's precision. But with recovery came vulnerability. Eminem wasn't afraid to admit that the struggle wasn't over. In interviews, he said, "There are still days where I feel like I could slip, but I remind myself what it cost me the first time." That discipline became his new addiction, staying alive. Sobriety gave him back his craft, but it also returned to him something far more important: fatherhood. For years during his addiction, addiction, he had been a ghost in his daughter's lives, physically present, emotionally absent. Now, he made it his mission to rebuild those relationships. His daughter Haley became a recurring source of pride and grounding. In one interview, when asked what he was most proud of, Eminem didn't mention Grammys or sales. He said, "I'm proud of Haley. She's doing great." It's moments like that which define his later music. Vulnerability replacing venom, growth replacing rage. By the mid-2010s, Eminem had re-established himself as not just a rapper, but a survivor in an industry notorious for consuming its own. His sobriety became a symbol for hope, proof that recovery wasn't weakness, but strength. The Guardian, 2017, observed that his comeback inspired a new generation of artists to confront their mental health struggles openly. His journey also mirrored a broader shift in hip-hop culture, one where vulnerability began to be seen as authenticity rather than weakness. Artists like Logic, NF, and Macklemore have cited Eminem's honesty as an influence on their own discussions of addiction and depression. Yet, even with fame restored and demons tamed, the tragedy of Eminem's life remained etched into every bar he wrote. Because his brilliance was born from suffering, his redemption carried echoes of pain. He was free, but not unscarred. When Revival dropped in 2017, it received mixed reviews. Critics said it was too political, too raw. But for Eminem, it wasn't about pleasing anyone, it was about telling the truth. 2 years later, Kamikaze, 2018, silenced critics who thought he'd lost his edge. It was fiery, unapologetic, and lyrically unmatched. In it, he addressed everyone who doubted him, proving that sobriety hadn't softened his bite, it had refined it. He told Sway Calloway in an interview, "When I rap now, I do it because I love it again. I don't have to prove anything, but I still can." In Music to Be Murdered by 2020, he continued blending introspection with intensity, touching again on loss, addiction, and mortality, now from the perspective of a man who'd conquered both fame and death. When The Guardian reviewed the album, it called it a man's ongoing dialogue with his own shadow. But despite the accolades and continued chart-topping releases, Eminem has largely withdrawn from public life. He rarely attends award shows, hardly does interviews, and keeps his personal life fiercely private. Detroit remains his sanctuary, the one place where he's still just Marshall. He once said, "I don't need the world's validation anymore. I got my peace." And for a man who once chased chaos, peace was the greatest prize of all. What makes Eminem's story truly tragic isn't just the pain he endured, it's how much of himself he had to lose to find his soul again. He sacrificed his sanity for success, his health for fame, his friendships for art, but in the end, he found a version of redemption that few ever do, not in record sales, but in recovery. In 2025, Eminem remains a cultural icon, one of the greatest lyricists in history, but also one of its most human. His music continues to evolve, and his legacy extends beyond records. He's become a living testament to survival, to what it means to lose everything and still rebuild. His foundation quietly funds recovery programs in Detroit, and he often uses his platform to advocate for addiction awareness, though he rarely publicizes it. And every year, on the anniversary of his sobriety, he posts the same simple message. No hashtags, no grand statements, just a chip, a photo, and a quiet acknowledgement, still standing. It's poetic, really, that a man once defined by anger and chaos found grace not in noise, but in silence. His tragedy became his triumph, his addiction became his awakening, and his music, the same verses that once chronicled destruction, became the soundtrack to survival. In the end, the tragic fate of Eminem wasn't death, it was a transformation. Because from the ashes of Slim Shady, Marshall Mathers was reborn, sober, scarred, but stronger than ever. Thanks for watching. Check out other cards on the screen.